But there was 2 or 3 different things there. Like I don't want to say too loud, but there were some like maybe some lost in translation type stuff. You know, and so
Would just be a month.
It'll just be a modification. Yeah.
And Ken will be back when we
Timing up, because I was like, I wanted to get it in this week. I'm like, okay, I'll let you know. Good deal. That'll work. I don't know. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we're not, you know, I guess.
so like my
I go back.
one thing I gotta figure out, like, so we're separating MPOs and RPOs now, you know, a team lead, MPO and RPO team lead, right? Michelle, I saw Michelle's the team lead from RPOs. And, Anne Marie is my team lead for the MPOs. Like she's done all the admin, financial stuff for some time now. She's not really organized, and also she'll be good. Gotta get the descriptions verified, and then we'll planners, and then planners. So there's like 5 on the MPO side, 5 on the MPO side. So these are the wheels that they good. Let's go. Because we're gonna have big working across regions now.
I think.
Like one person. Regional contact, like they've been RPO person or an MPO person. That's what they kind of. I keep mentioning that to Preston and Matt. I'm like,
Something from.
They're trying to get rid of money. Yeah. Hey, we'll take it.
But.
the ROD, but like a 30-minute.
You didn't want that one.
Yeah.
And they go by regions. Now I gotta kind of figure out, will that just be my
Euro.
big lead?
Oh, the innovative finance.
Sessions. So I have 2 briefings this week with them.
Extra stuff, you know, OCT, you know, we've got, you know, trying to get rid of as much as I can, you know, and just focus on the MPOs.
They'll have everything at the county.
We'll see.
Oh, we're hanging in there.
You guys catch y'all. Yeah, and we still do, which is good because it kind of keeps things interesting, but that's something.
I went like after first, I got there.
Focus on the real work. Steve Allen used to say, the filet deal gets the load. Yeah. You know, and so if you don't say no, then they'll. Morning, how are you? Used to bring Deborah out of retirement. They're edgy.
Don't envy you that. Like that one fail script that I do every year.
Like, up and just make it to our board once and we get approval for the whole year. It's like, we're good. I know, right?
Together because everybody's going every which way. But, you know, that's the big thing. Like, we're getting this new application. To do the tip in, which would
He
be,
thinks the ones I got.
it's an off-the-shelf company. Company that has kind of an off-the-shelf product, and then we're gonna customize it for us.
I remember that in the yard. I thought it was
Integrate.
Unless somebody up at the top says and they're gonna give us the money.
Okay.
Bring it out.
Okay, I just want to be on the same page.
Some guy.
No?
Like that.
Good to see you. I noticed some previous years, this in January, we canceled.
It's
Seemed to be chock full today. Yeah, it's good. Michael's good luck.
Big item on there.
I know. He's gonna do the RTP. Any tough questions? I'll get those first. No.
Nobody wants to say, but I really didn't catch it, but but funny, she name dropped you. That she was like, cover my mind.
Yeah, okay.
I've been to the chamber of it. Alex.
Ellen.
Yeah.
Okay.
She said.
That's just new. Local city, you know, you guys any idea what I'm talking about?
Actually say, I did learn a lot more inside program. It was like,
I'm trying to get the thing.
so that's good at least.
And
Okay. That'd be nice, huh?
Yes, is there some stuff that can't go through Chris, that they might need some
Yes.
county help on. You know, we're,
That's the.
bones are buried anyway, so.
Trying not to get buried myself.
Well, I know.
I'm trying not to make my body buried.
Email. Some days from now.
I'm trying to figure out.
Trying to get everybody kind of connected.
Makes sense.
Be a good chance for me to, I'd love to come talk to some people. So they can understand.
Are they obligated?
How are you?
Yeah.
Good, how are you? Good.
I'm sure it's.
Hey.
Much.
Yeah.
My guess is they've all changed, that they don't work there anymore. But I copied you on an email.
Yeah, I saw that yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, it's part of. Sometimes I print stuff. And I didn't think out, and that was.
I forgot to read the list and see Manchester, and I've asked Danny Oliver. to Manchester.
I think it's perfectly.
Yes, we are, guys. Just trying to get some.
Right. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I thought that was on to you, but yeah, we're gonna talk about it today.
That's-
Safe.
I'm sorry.
I know.
Yeah. I'm wrong.
Yeah, I just got one for Christmas. I had it on my Amazon list. It's like that.
I've had this one for 2 years. I used
Talk to you about the,
because
Right.
is that a big issue with you guys right now?
You have to remind me, I was gonna check the email before I left.
City connection, county roads?
Yeah. It, from time to time, and the, about a couple minutes after the meeting.
Go through this.
Yeah.
Every time. Is there a question?
Back was Monday, so I had to move
10%.
our temporary location. So yeah, it's Columbia Avenue. We're in an old, we're in a bank building. It's built a few years ago. It was a large bank building, and they had built like a campus. And the bank's already moving. I think they moved a bunch of their locations. First Bank moved to Nashville.
Yeah. Construction in that building. But Josh, no, I need it.
So our administration is sharing the bank, the main bank building, now that's on Columbia Avenue. Engineering, building and neighborhood services, the rest of them code. And planning is in the. Behind them, we call it the middle building.
It's got parking garage.
It does, but the bank won't give us the whole garage, even though we're leasing from, we only get the top 2 floors, even though we're getting the entire building. The bank's keeping the bottom 2.5 floors. of the garage.
Planning commission.
So they'll work that. Yeah, well, those, they still keep it. Oh. They're keeping those.
That's it's like getting it renovated, the city hall, so they
Tear it down to the ground, and we're digging a hole to actually put a parking garage underneath it. And
I don't know what the fuck.
they're saying it's gonna be like a 2-year job. It's like, no. Yeah.
cemetery there or something.
Well, the good thing was it used to be like years ago, it was stable, so.
It's different than the last.
I've been ready to go by and throw like pennies and chicken bones in there, just randomly.
Appreciate it.
The grant contracts are expired though, so.
That's okay.
Use that money last because
Throw them in there.
I don't actually invoice right now.
It's still gonna be, yeah, it'll be all right. It'll take me a while for MTA to get RTA billed and we'll just.
House, like church.
You know, I grew up Baptist.
There in Old Minneapolis, down at the bottom of the Hill Greens Mill.
Drum right.
Drum right, thank you. She bought a house right there.
Construction. And I'll probably want to do those.
Yeah.
They had it closed when they were doing the roundabout. The roundabout thing and all that stuff. And they had to paper, they were doing.
Yes.
Yeah, all the good words. Yeah. They just don't know what they were doing. Yeah, you could tell it's trying to get the. I didn't take it. It was.
You hear about ATIP, ATIP grant? Yesterday. East Nashville's folks.
That connection, it wouldn't have worked. The roundabout's the only way that works. It makes it look really good.
I had a. What about spring? Like. So we have like tendinitis. And so. Yeah.
You know, I'm in my mid-30s and I feel like I'm like 75.
You go to the doctor, I can tell you what's wrong. Subdivision.
Takes a toll on the body.
I know. I know.
Okay. You're not afraid. Yeah.
Yes, it was nice. Got a little rest in.
So.
Have a car. Nice job.
Good. You know, we traveled. So, you know, we could be with all the family because we could.
How are y'all doing?
And it was. So.
All right, everybody, we will, we'll go ahead and call to order the January 8th, 2025 meeting of the Transportation Coordinating Committee. I appreciate everybody coming in this morning. This time, I'll ask for a motion to approve the minutes of the November 6th TCC meeting. Everybody's had a chance to view those. We have a motion. Do we have a second? Motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. No, likewise. I hear none. That motion stands as approved. Moving on to item 2, public comments. At this time, open to the floor to any member of the public who wishes to make a public comment. Do we have anybody in attendance today that wishes to speak? Comments can also be emailed to comments@gnrc.org. Hearing no comments, we'll move on to our action items on the agenda this morning. First item 3A, endorsement is requested of a proposed amendment to the Regional Transportation Plan. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Skipper, GNRC Executive Director, to make that presentation.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Chair, good morning, everyone. We have for your consideration endorsement of a proposed amendment to the Regional Transportation Plan. This is our RTP that spans fiscal year 2026 through 2045 that was adopted by the Transportation Policy Board back in February of 2021. The request comes from TDOT to amend the plan to incorporate the proposed choice lanes project along I-24 generally between Nashville and Murfreesboro. This is estimated to be about a $3.7 billion project that would be paid for through user fees collected through tolls charged on the choice lanes and cost overruns, any costs not covered by those user fees would be covered by funding appropriated through the Transportation Modernization Act that was set aside specifically for P3 projects. So staff is bringing this amendment to you with a recommendation for endorsement. The proposed project is fiscally constrained given the revenue streams that have been identified. With your endorsement, we'll present this to the Transportation Policy Board on January 15th. We've had several meetings about this particular project, both at this committee and at the Transportation Policy Board over the last feels like last 6 months. We do have TDOT representatives. The project manager, Rebecca Hammonds, is here with us today if you have any questions about the project itself. But the request to amend the TIP is, or the RTP is being done at this time principally to allow us to then subsequently amend the transportation improvement program with pre-construction activities to allow TDOT to engage Federal Highway on design NEPA right-of-way acquisition, which is required considering that this is an interstate facility. So happy to answer any questions. I just want to get this on the table for discussion, and the staff request is for an endorsement of the proposed amendment.
Thank you, Michael. Do we have any questions for GNRC staff or for the folks at TDOT? Had a good bit of discussion about this project the last several meetings. Hearing none, I'll ask for a motion to endorse this proposed amendment to the RTP.
I'll make a motion to endorse it.
Mr. Free has made a motion, and do we have a second? Mr. Higgs has made a second. All in favor of the motion to endorse, please say aye.
Aye.
I'm opposed. Hearing none, that motion is endorsed by the TCC. One thing to note, there's going to be a formal public hearing that's going to be scheduled on this item at the Transportation Policy Board meeting on January the 15th. Moving on to action item B, which is to amend the Transportation Improvement Program. For several items, I'll introduce Daniel McDonald, GNRC Director of Transportation and Infrastructure, to make this presentation.
All right, we have 3 amendments to the Transportation Improvement Program, the TIP. You all have probably seen this slide before, but bears refreshing at the beginning of the year here. What is the TIP? It's a short-range work program covering a 4-year span. This is the fiscal year 23 to 26 short-range program. It lists all regionally significant or federally funded transportation projects in the MPO area. It has to be consistent with the RTP, and it is fiscally constrained by federal appropriations or estimated revenues. The current TIP was adopted in November 2022 and accounts for approximately $1.7 billion. And anytime you would like to go look at the interactive map, it is available at gnrc.org/TIP. So we have 3 proposed amendments today. The first one is the North Nashville Jefferson Street Corridor Planning and Environmental Linkages Study by Metro Nashville. This is a USDOT discretionary grant that Nashville won. This was in the previous TIP, so you'll see the old TIP number on there, but it did not carry through to this TIP. So we are bringing this project back. We're adding it to the new TIP, and this will be a federal funding for planning and outreach on the corridor to see what multiple improvements are needed on the Jefferson Street corridor. The second one is Mount Pleasant Downtown Revitalization. This project is going to construction. This is adding a TAP award of federal money and local match to finish out that construction. And then the third one, of course, is the choice lanes. This is in conjunction with the RTP amendment. And while federal money is not part of this project, it is, of course, of regional significance, and it is on a federal interstate highway. So we're programming that into the TIP with the state money enabled by the TMA that will cover the preliminary design, NEPA, and right-of-way expenses for that. With that, are there any questions on the TIP amendments?
On the North Nashville study, I know there were some, Federal Highway had some concerns about whether that met the scope met the intent of the earmark. Those being resolved.
Yeah, turn that over to.
We've had some
Nashville.
discussions with NDOT on it and are happy with their approach to do appel for this one. that includes consideration of cap and other considerations. So yeah, so we've discussed this a lot with them and we're happy with the approach moving forward.
Thank you.
Michael, I'd have to imagine with the West Lanes project, $3.7 billion, that's probably the biggest project ever programmed in the state of Tennessee, right? And any tip.
Probably. And only 840 would have been approaching that as a single project.
Do we have any questions for GNRC staff on any of these three projects?
I do have a question on the TDOT tip amendment sheet. Is the full table going to be filled out before it goes before the TPB? So that like for the funding types?
Oh, the remainder being the private partnership money.
On the,
So I'm looking for one that was emailed out. So I've got-
the ICE-24 Choice States projects.
Yes.
I mean, get to that page in the packet.
I'm looking at the one that was emailed out, so I may have an older version.
We do, well, so what we're programming is the 242 million. So the remainder, the difference between that and 3.7 billion won't be programmed until those phases are ready.
Right.
Is that your question?
Yes, I was just wanting to just for informational purposes, just the source of the funding.
The source of oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
It's state money.
Yes.
Both of the costs for PE, NEPA and right-of-way acquisition will be state dollars that are advanced prior to the construction that would then generate the user fees. But thank you for that. That should be filled in.
You talk to you more about some of the financing and funding.
Yeah, it just helps to see it there, especially when, some of the elected officials see that and ask where it's coming from specifically in the state budget.
Yeah, thank you. That's just an omission.
Yeah, thank you.
Any additional questions on any of these proposed tip amendments?
Question about the Mount Juliet downtown revitalization. In the description, it says LSTBG construction phase funds are being increased, but in the table, it looks as if it's just local funds that are being added in addition to what's happening with the TAP funds.
The description needs to be updated.
Yeah, I think you're right. The description needs to be updated. The additional 2 TAP lines are the additional TAP awards. I think this came from a single TAP award, and then we're adding the other for construction. So we will update the description there to make sure that's reflected.
Well, it does look like the local line did increase too.
It also increased too. Yeah, thank you.
So you might just be able to change that LSTBG to local.
Right.
Good catch. Any additional questions or comments? Hearing none, I'll ask for a motion to endorse the proposed amendments to the tip.
Make a motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Jennifer. So we have a motion and a second. Any additional discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, hearing none, that motion to endorse stands as approved. Then we'll move on to action item C, annual safety performance targets. And I'll introduce Ashley Glasscock, GNRC Senior Research Analyst, to present these proposed annual targets for our regional roadway safety measures. Ashley?
Thank you, Josh. I'm Ashley Glasscock, and I'm here to give you a little update on how we did last year in terms of our annual targets and what our targets are for the next upcoming year. So just kind of a background on what to know. Back in 2021, the TPB adopted our 2045 RTP, and they established roadway safety as the region's top priority. And therefore, we decided to take a long-term goal that deviated from the states that had us reducing serious injuries and fatalities for roadway crashes by 1% per year, all the way out to the year 2045. The purpose of the annual target setting was to refocus the region on long-term goals and taking awareness to changes in policy or different approaches for funding. And GNRC continues to engage in safety planning efforts across the region through engagement and continued data analysis. This is just an illustration showing traffic fatalities. We do have these available for all measures, but I don't want to bore you with the numerous sets of charts. This is basically showing how we have done over the past 15 years, I think, in gray. So historic annual fatalities. In 2024, you can see that we had 225 fatalities. So we're still sitting above that 1% annual reduction line where we want to be in order to get us to fatalities under 152 a year by 2045. To keep us on this trend line, we would need 2025's target for fatalities to stay under 185 people for that year. And then you may be wondering how we did in terms of all of our safety performance targets. So for the number of fatalities, we missed our 2024 target of 187 by so far having 225. Those are still preliminary numbers. Those won't be finalized for at least 2 years, but we're still getting in police reports from over the holidays. The fatality rate was missed also. We wanted to keep them below 0.8 fatalities per 100 million vehicle miles traveled. In 2024, they were 0.95 fatalities for every 100 million vehicle miles traveled. For serious injuries, the target was 1,284 seriously injured. So far, we have had 1,058. So we have met that target as of right now. For the serious injury rate, we've also met that one. We had a target set for 5.48 serious injuries per those 100 million vehicle miles traveled. In 2024, we had 4.47. And then in terms of number of non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries, the goal was to keep them below 170 in 2024. And unfortunately, we've already had 178 in 2024. Going forward for this year, the annual targets for 2025, those are set to keep us on that 1% annual reduction line out to 2025. And so number of fatalities would be under 185 people killed. The fatality rate would be under 0.78 fatalities per those 100 million vehicle miles traveled. And the number of seriously injured would be under 1,271 with a resulting rate of 5.37. And the number of non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries would need to stay under 168 in order to keep us in line with those 2045 goals that you can see in the very last column. Also, I want to point out that we do track these things every month on one of our crash tracking dashboards. It will show you by severity, by county, by mode, and how we've compared to the month to date in those previous years. We also have available county safety profiles for each of the individual counties because I know that each problem is different in every individual county. And so these are more specialized to your individual ones, and they can be found at the website at the link below. And I'll open it up, I guess, to any questions.
Can you go back to the trend line there?
Sure can. This one?
That looks like a significant drop. How much of that you think is due to data that hadn't come in yet as far as actuals?
Probably a lot of it. Most of the data, they try to get them in within 2 weeks of it, of an accident occurring. And with us being only 6 days, 8 days into the year, they probably are lacking a lot. And a lot of times what we'll see is fatalities will shoot up because people will be seriously injured and then they'll move to fatality. And so that will tend to increase and rebound a little bit. So that's probably due to that nature of not having all of the traffic reports in for over the holidays. But if I had to guess, it'd still be a little bit less the way that it looks like it's coming in. A lot of them are in, but yeah. That's your question.
Any additional questions for Ashley?
One question. When we're setting the hard targets for the actual physical number of accidents, not the rate itself. So I agree with setting the rate at a lower number to, to hopefully reduce the rate of accidents. Hopefully our projects are making a difference. Our engagement's making a difference. So that's ideal. But the hard number itself, even if you're having are we normalizing that against the rate of population increase in the region? Are we looking at that? Because if say I'm trying to reduce the rate of accidents or serious injury fatalities by 1%, but my population's increasing by 3% per year, you're never going to meet that hard number goal. So do we look at that?
We do, but our goal is set on reducing the number of people, not the rate.
Okay.
And we demonstrated that that's possible at the policy board last year.
Okay.
When we showed there were 7 states with many more people living in them than we do with far fewer fatalities.
Okay.
So it's a way we typically think about things as planners and engineers, is to look at the rate and the normalize. But in this particular case, we don't do that.
Okay.
That's where we differ from the state's approach. They typically work on the rate and then back into that number. We choose to work on the number and then just let the rate be a calculation.
Practical level, like when we look at the number of fatalities, do they rate them at all as far as driver behavior versus road, that like they got messed up on an on-ramp or an off-ramp, or do you track that at all? Like how much of this is just bad driving and not necessarily related to the road itself, as opposed to, we got some issues where now we got a lot of growth and there's a lot of places where I drive where we got on ramps that are backed up. You're just trying to get on, and that's a issue I think we can deal with. But if it's percentage of these are just tailgating at 90, do we track that?
So I do tend to look at some of the details that go into those things, like driving behavior, such as speeding, not wearing a seatbelt, drinking and driving, all of those things. But what I've learned through looking at a lot of these crashes is they're very nuanced. Like you could have the driving behavior be bad, but also the infrastructure was available to allow them to be that way. So it's very complex. So you can get correlation, but to get a causation from these things is very much nuanced to the crash itself. But we do track how those driving behaviors, how those roadway conditions, how those things typically account for those crashes to get at that idea. So we do look at that. And that's available a lot of times in those county profiles that we provide. And then we also have a more detailed dashboard online as well that looks at all those different characteristics, all the different types of drivers, all the different roadway conditions, and those sorts of things.
I will add though to that, we do not discount a crash just because it was bad driver behavior, because we can design for bad behavior. We can regulate for bad behavior. We could patrol for speeding. We could patrol for distracted driving and DUIs. I mean, we're still trying to influence public policies that grapple with the fact that we're not all driving with perfect behavior. So whether it was a crash that was a result of just a horrible intersection design, an outdated intersection design that isn't keeping up with the traffic patterns, or whether it was because there's a recurring hotspot of crashes that are a result of driver behaviors, we treat them all equally in terms of our interest in making sure that we're reducing serious injuries and fatalities on the roadways.
Does it track unlicensed drivers?
It does. It does. And those actually do account for a large portion of those. I think we presented on it maybe 2 years back where we had the details of those things. And that tends to be one of our big ticket items. That and then unbelted drivers tend to be your biggest percentages of severe crashes.
What was the last one I couldn't hear?
Unbelted, so not wearing their seatbelt, those, and then unlicensed drivers tend to account for a large portion of those fatalities. But yes.
I just always feel like when we have these discussions, there's always maybe a lack of presence, and maybe you have these discussions with law enforcement, highway patrol, and combining, our conversation with their conversation could probably, have a lot to do with maybe trying to bring that number down. Because I think without enforcement, and if everybody's on the same page on where these accidents are happening, these serious accidents are happening, that would help combine the two departments to work on those specific areas if we can figure that out.
And I will say I sit in every month on Metro Nashville's fatal crash review. So every fatal crash that happens in Davidson County, they actually review case by case by case. So trying to get a little bit of understanding of what they're actually dealing with day to day, and then what we deal with when we're talking about funding and project programming. But yes, I agree.
Ma'am, could I help you on that one? Chris Taylor, I did 30 years with the Nashville Police Department and retired as their number 2. What she was saying, every fatal accident that happens in Nashville is completely reconstructed. They look at every factor that might have pertained to it. And what we've always said from law enforcement, it kind of supports what y'all do 100%. If it's an intersection that's the cause of the death, then everybody should have died. What the reason is because it might be a bad intersection. It's not the best intersection, but it's always going to be driver behavior. And that's the one that through education, like Michael said, through the different programs, the policies y'all try and push, that's where the difference is made. And so, there's a ton of coordination, just so you know, with GNRC and the local police, Metro one, and then the state and everybody else. It's a combined effort, but I always go back and I know there's a lot of engineers in the room, so I'll say it this way. It's more about the driver than it ever is the roadway. People are going to drive dumb. And there's only so much you can do. The education is the important part of it, but I will say what y'all do here for GNRC, it's invaluable and super important. So that was it. But yes, sir, they coordinate a whole lot with us, or when I was there. So.
Any additional questions on the safety performance targets? Okay. Hearing none, we are being asked to endorse the targets that are proposed by the staff here today. So do I have a motion to endorse? A motion. Do we have a second? Really the second.
Yeah.
We have a motion, then we have a second. Billy. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, the safety performance targets are endorsed. And thank you, Ashley, for that good presentation. And these are scheduled to go to the Transportation Policy Board on January the 15th. Approval. That concludes our action items and moves us on to the informational items. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Skipper to present the next two items on the RTP call for projects and the UPWP call for studies.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To wrap up that last item, though, a couple more comments. One, to the conversation about coordination with local law enforcement. The work that we do with local law enforcement was a big part of our process to develop the Safe Streets for All application that was submitted to USDOT the last round. We were funded near $6 million to implement safety countermeasures across the region. We weren't funded for one of the pieces of what we had proposed, but what we were looking to do was to begin working with law enforcement in terms of giving them access to big data for where they could find hotspots of where behavior was an issue, where they could deploy heightened patrol and even test out more regulatory countermeasures so we can do pre-post studies. So it's not always the responsibility of the engineer to prevent roadway crashes. And so the way we approach this topic as a regional council and NPO is just more holistically than engineering. There's a lot we can do to engineer for behaviors, but we've also got to be thinking about the amount of funding that we're providing for patrol, the methods of patrol, both in terms of positive and negative consequences of patrol. So that's part of the conversation. So I appreciate that question. And then Jonathan, I also appreciate your question. And we do want to be really clear that it is the absolute number of folks that are dying or being seriously injured that we are setting as a goal. And as we get into discussions of our update to the regional transportation plan, which is the informational item that I have for you first, that'll be an opportunity for us to have a conversation about what our goal should be for the next 25 years from a roadway safety standpoint. The targets that we're setting each year now are implementing a methodology that was decided in the production of the 2045 plan. So we'll be able to open that back up and have a conversation about the appropriateness of that 1% annual reduction that we've set for ourselves. Many communities are setting Vision Zero goals. Instead, what we'd be looking for is the actual rate that we'd have to achieve to get to zero by 2045 or 2050. We settled on 1% reduction amongst the scenarios that we presented last time.
And the reason I asked that question is right now there's no repercussions for not meeting that goal. But if you don't, if there ever are any kind of repercussions set into place for not meeting a goal, then perhaps.
Well, there is. It's just not seen necessarily as a penalty. The repercussion.
That's what I mean. But there's not a penalty.
The highway safety money that is appropriated to the state for safety projects cannot be flexed out of the safety program if you're not meeting your targets.
There's not as far as us at this body.
Right. You don't lose obligation authority or anything like that. Yeah, you're not gonna, there's no hammer. But I think it is good federal policy to try to encourage states and regions to take seriously the issue of roadway safety, and to, not reprogram safety money for a widening project because you need to put more cars on the road.
So you better use it somewhere else.
Yeah, exactly. So thank you for that conversation. First informational item is related to the regional transportation plan. We kicked this process off with you all and the policy board last year. I'm going to go through some of the information we shared with you back then. The point of this meeting is to engage with you in the upcoming call for projects. This is the period of the planning process where we ask you to submit your proposed improvements that you'd like to see funded between 2026 and 2050 at some point along the way. And so we've got a very formal process for intaking your proposed projects. Then they go through an evaluation and scoring process to get us to a point where we can settle on what our regional priorities are for federal funds for the next 25 years. But things to know about the regional transportation plan. Many of you have been part of this process for several cycles now. We update our plan every 5 years, but the plan is required by federal law for metropolitan areas of 50,000 or more in population. We must cover a 20-year horizon. Our plans have historically covered a 25-year horizon. It must account for all federally funded projects that we anticipate moving forward in the next 25 years, or regionally significant projects. An example of that would be the Choice Lanes project, which is an improvement to an interstate corridor without federal funds. That is still a project that's required to be in the plan in order to open the door for that federal engagement to move that project forward. So we're looking for projects that you have that may be regionally significant, even if you aren't looking for federal funds to help pay for it. It must include a balanced budget. So as part of this process, we estimate revenues out to the year 2050 based on what we know about appropriations today. So we have some leeway in terms of making some assumptions about access to discretionary grants. But otherwise, what we're trying to do is forecast future appropriations from the formula programs at the federal level, historic funding patterns at the state level, projecting those forward. That becomes our budget that we have to spend through the planning process. And then as we evaluate projects, we're essentially determining which of those should be first in line for those revenues. Projects that we can't line up with future revenue, we keep them in the plan. We call those illustrative projects because they're still important to us. And as additional funds become available, either through formula funds or discretionary grants, we want to make sure that those projects are accounted for as well. So there is a fiscally constrained component of this. It's not simply a wish list. And then we must address, I believe, there's still 10 planning factors as of the current legislation, Transportation Act, but we've got to make sure that we're addressing federal goals and initiatives, as well as the things that the state is trying to accomplish across Tennessee. And so the plan will seek to accomplish our regional and local goals, but also needs to speak to federal and state objectives when it comes to transportation and the things that transportation affects across our communities. And then, like I mentioned, we update our plan every 5 years. There is I think was our last the October meeting, we talked about the imminent change in the ozone, the NAAQS ozone NPM 2.5 standards that may trigger a non-attainment situation for our region. And if that were to happen, then we would be required to update the plan every 4 years. The updates to plans and non-attainment areas or maintenance areas is much more difficult because we also have to also set a budget for emissions and make sure that the projects that we're building don't create so much traffic that exceed those emissions levels. And so we're fingers crossed we stay under those standards. So, but every 5 years is our current cycle. Current plan was adopted in 2021. It includes $10.5 billion of federal formula funds and matching dollars from the state and locals. That was our revenue forecast for the 25-year period. At the time, we were seeing about $250 million a year for transportation in our region for projects through the NPO process, combination of all sources, so about $250 million. That sounds like a lot of money. But when we did peer comparisons, we're really near the bottom of the list as a region, as a state, in terms of the investment per capita that we're making into transportation. For example, the Denver region, which is slightly smaller today than we project to be by 2050, at the time 2045, generates about 600 million a year just from their transit sales tax, right? That 600 million compared to the 250 million a year that we had at the time from all of our federal, state, and local sources for these regionally significant projects. So part of the objective of this plan update is to make sure that we're making the case for the projects that we need to fund, not just saying how we're going to use the limited money that we have, right? Because then we're never really demonstrating the true need of the region. But this is available online, both in terms of a technical document as well as a short executive summary that you see the cover of on the screen. And then there is an interactive map of the projects that are in the fiscally constrained part of the plan, as well as the unfunded illustrative needs. This is the map of those projects by horizon. The horizons, we have a short, mid, long-term horizon for each of these plans. Our horizons for the new plan will be 2030, 2040, 2050. This is a look at how it all shook out back in 2021. The yellow, which doesn't really show up on the screen very well, it's much more dominant on this map than the red color, so I'll say that. So we have a long way to go to identify funding opportunities to address the true needs across the region. Again, this is an interactive map. You can see information about all these projects at that. You can get to through that link. But you can also see these projects overlaid with data from the time we did the plan. So crashes, crash hotspots, traffic volumes, growth and development, so densities, environmentally sensitive areas. So you can see these projects in relation to the things that we're looking at as we're prioritizing our needs. So this is the timeline that we walked through with you a few months ago. I want to draw your attention to sort of the beginning of 2025 here. The first quarter of this calendar year is where we're engaged with you through the call for projects that I'll talk about here in a second. This is a three-month process for you to submit your applications to us. And then the next couple of months following that deadline, we'll be coming into to your community. What we'd like to do is convene all the jurisdictions, transit agencies, and the Department of Transportation within each county to talk through the projects that were submitted, what we're seeing in terms of evaluation, figure out what more we need to do to make sure that we're representing transportation needs holistically, make sure that we can feel good coming out of the call for projects with a really good list of candidates for the board to consider. So that's really the focus, the first quarter of this year into the next couple of months as we get into the summer, is identifying all those individual projects that you want to see funded over the next 25 years. We'll point most of the projects that you want to have funded over the next 25 years are projects that you wanted funded 10 years ago. They're not always visionary. It just takes us a long time to get to them. So when we do this, you're going to be tempted to just apply for the projects that you've been applying for the last 30 years. We also want you to think, though, forward. It's a little bit more work to identify those projects that you don't think are going to get funded. But again, we're shortchanging ourselves by not telling the complete story of transportation needs. And then we wonder why we don't have any more money year over year. And that's a little bit inaccurate because the Transportation Modernization Act, the Improve Act have both been attempts to address the big picture issues of transportation funding. The Improve Act authorized the Choose How You Move ballot initiative that passed. So we'll have more local funding in Davidson County for transit projects. But we have a long way to go to increase our funding opportunities. So as far as the call for projects itself, the first thing we'll do is next week, we will have, I don't have a date and time for this yet. We'll follow up in the follow-up email. We'll have a live virtual training for how to use our online application. I'm looking around the room and probably 30% of you have used this before. So there's a lot of new faces since we did this last, or if you're not a new face, you may not have been the primary person doing it last time, but you will be this time. So we'll do a training session for how to use our software. It's available online right now at apply.nashvillempo.org. If you have an account, it's in this database. This is a new instance of what you used last time, so you won't see as projects all the projects that are in the current plan. It's a new a cleaned out platform for you to begin to apply for projects. So you have an account, use your email address to log in. I will email you the password. We reset the passwords for everybody. But what we did to make it easy for you this time around is that all the applications that you submitted last time, we unsubmitted them for you. So they're waiting on you to go in and review and update and resubmit if you want to. If it's a project that you no longer want or a project that's already been completed, you can just delete it. But you don't have to, we do want you to look at it again because a lot has changed, particularly cost estimates. But they're going to be waiting on you. And it's just one person per jurisdiction. And I'll show this to you in a minute. So if you had multiple people from your agency submitting projects, we just picked one, best guess, and assigned all those projects to that person's account. In the case that the two of you, you have all the RTA projects, you have all of the MTA projects. If you want to swap, they just let us know.
Okay.
But that system, that's one of the bugs of the system is that all the people within a jurisdiction can't see the pending applications. They can't see them until they're submitted. Then everybody can see what's submitted. Okay. But I'm going to toggle over to the application. I'm not going to do a demonstration today because it's just too much. We're all different places with respect to our exposure to this. So there's no right way to talk about it, but I will show you what it looks like as soon as you get logged in. And Marty, I'm going to use you didn't have an account. We created an account for you. We put all the Metro projects in your account for applications, and we can move those to John or whoever you want them to go to. But just for simplicity's sake, I'll get logged in. Again, apply.nashvillempo.org. It'll be in the follow-up email along with the date and time. We'll do our virtual training, which will be recorded. So if you can't make that, you can go to the recording.
As last time, Franklin appreciates the free advertising.
Anybody know what that is?
Yeah, it's at the Bicentennial Mall.
Or what's your work email password? So if you were designated the person to hold the applications, this is what you're going to see. You're going to see a list of your applications, just as you had drafted them last time around. And the status is going to be saved. You click into the application, review all of your details. It's all completely open to edits. It's really important that the person applying for the project may not be the best person for us to reach back out to. So at the bottom of each application, there's a project contact that will always populate. If you're doing a new application, it will pre-populate with your information. So if you need to change that to somebody else, feel free to do so. It'll still be in your account until it's submitted. But just note that it pre-populates, but you may not be the right person for us to follow up with in terms of questions. So you'll just review your applications. The one thing that we haven't figured out yet, because the software wasn't intended to be used this way, but your uploads from last time, you can't view them from the screen. So we're going to upload all of your uploads to a box drive so that you can go access those documents. You'll probably want to upload those. You'll probably want to delete these anyway. You'll just X those off and then re-upload. Every application needs at minimum a narrative to be uploaded, and that's just a form you can download, and I'll show that to you in a minute. But before you can submit, you need to have a narrative uploaded. If you don't have the narrative at the time you fill out the form, you just save the form and come back to it later. Right. So this is what you're going to see when you first log in, and here are all the applications that Metro filled out last time. If you want to submit for a new project, you come over to the right and just pick the appropriate application form. Roadways is probably what you're going to use mostly. This is any improvement to the roadway network. So it could be sidewalks or bicycle lanes, ITS, could be transit related. If if it's improving the actual right of way of the roadway network, you're going to use that one. The transit application is going to be if you want to buy buses or equipment or capital investments and non-roadway infrastructure. So these are pretty self-explanatory. You click into the new application, fill the form out, upload the narrative. You can upload other supporting documentation as well, but you have to upload the narrative. The instructions for these forms are downloadable over here. View instructions, you can download that PDF, and the instructions for all the forms are in that same PDF. And then if you need the narrative form, you can just download that here, save that, and then just fill it out for all of your projects. They're both linked from the application page itself. So we're here to work with you to get these applications filled out. We'll do the training next week. Once the data is into the system, that's when the power of this will be visible to you, and that it'll begin to aggregate all of your application information. It'll marry it up with all the performance measures that we're going to track for these projects related to the context of the project, traffic volumes, freight movements, transit, walking, biking, roadway safety measures, environmentally sensitive areas around that project, vulnerable populations, all that stuff will come together into a dashboard for each of the projects, along with the qualitative analysis that our staff will be doing to assess how well these projects either meet our goals as a region or things that we might want to communicate back to you in terms of things that might strengthen the project's competitiveness or get all the way to accomplishing a goal through your idea. So again, we have 3 months. March 14th is our ask of you. So be thinking about, even before you log in, you could be thinking about what those projects are going to be that you want to submit through the system. But again, we'll follow up with you on a training next week. Any immediate questions?
Project is partially funded or fully funded? Do we still do an application for it?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And the instructions will speak to that a little bit. So if you have a project that's already began, we'll probably encourage you to mark it for the 2030 horizon, which is the first horizon. And then when you fill out the project budget, instead of doing costs by horizon, you'll do cost by fiscal year through 2030 for the remaining phases of work that haven't been completed. If it's a project that hasn't started, we would ask that you probably put that in the 2040 at the earliest horizon. And then just budget your money by horizon. So all of it will probably be in the 2040 horizon in that case, but you'll want to still break it out by the phases of work. If that question and the answer didn't make sense to you today, it's probably just because you're first time to this, and we'll work at that beginning next week. Any other questions? Marty, are you going to fill out all these applications? You're going to fill out all these applications? You're going to review all these? But seriously, I have the list of who we, if you want to know as you walk out today, we had the list with us today in terms of who we assume to be the lead. Michael, you're the lead for Williamson County. Joe, we just took all of Joe's applications and put them in an account for you, right? Doug, you're on. Keith, you're on. Stacy, you have all the TDOT projects.
Yeah.
Michael just needs everybody's mother's maiden name and
Social security number,
favorite color. Yeah, just that kind of stuff.
Street you grew up on.
So that is all for this informational item, and I can just get into the next one. This is also an ask of you. Federal law prescribes to us 3 core documents as an MPO. We have a regional transportation plan that we're required to produce every 5 years. We have a transportation improvement program, which is the short range implementation arm of that plan that we're required to produce every 4 years. And then we have a unified planning work program that accounts for all of the planning activities that are either federally funded or leading to decisions about the use of federal funds. That's required to be updated every 2 years. Now, right? We do it every 2 years now.
Yeah, you don't do it.
We used to do it every year. So those are the 3 core documents. We just talked about the RTP. It is important to note, as you're applying for the RTP, you're also applying for the new tip. The new tip is also going to be developed this year. It's just the short range component of the RTP when we do these plan updates. And so you're also filling out the RTP application for your tip projects that you know are going to be completed by the end of 2026, which is when the current tip expires. So be mindful of that. And then we also are updating the UPWP. So we're actually updating all 3 of those required documents this year into the beginning of next year. And so I'll talk about the UPWP Now. Okay, so when we integrate into GNRC, we renamed, so I'll point this out. We call our Unified Planning Work Program, which is the federal terminology. We call that a transportation planning work program within the context of GNRC, because we have work programs for many types of topics that are federally required. So you may hear us refer to this as the transportation planning work program. We'll typically always abbreviate it as UPWP though, to avoid any confusion there. But it serves two purposes. One is it seeks to coordinate the planning activities across Middle Tennessee that are directly attributable to transportation decisions, or that are just shaping decisions that will impact the demand for or the results or outcomes as a result of transportation improvement. So even comprehensive plans that you're working on, whether they include a transportation element or not, the land use part of your planning is really important for us to know. So when we engage with you in an update to the UPWP, we're also asking you, like, when's the last time you updated the comprehensive plan? Does it include land use policy and transportation, a transportation vision or major thoroughfare plan or a transit element? So we're interested in knowing that stuff from you, but we're also interested, as you might suspect, in any transportation studies that you're doing that might lead to an update to your plan or might inform the projects that you might seek federal funding for. So part of it is just to understand what's happening across the region in terms of planning and research on matters that impact transportation decisions or outcomes. And so the other reason is that we're required to disclose or disclose to the public and all of our partners how we intend to use federal planning dollars provided to us principally through federal highway and federal transit through their metropolitan planning programs, how we're going to use those dollars for planning activities across the region. And those are the shared dollars that we get as an NPO that we fund our NPO staff and our NPO consultants with. So it's both of these, right? It's the federally funded planning activities, but it's also the things that you're working on or TDOT's working on that have a relationship to the things that we're doing regionally. We're going to be updating our current UPWP goes through September 30th of this year. It's online, gnrc.org/UPWP, and in it, you'll basically find information about the planning activities either you or GNRC or TDOT we're planning to do in fiscal years 2024 and 2025. And you'll also get to see, if you look in that document, where we intended to use our federal planning dollars on those activities. So that's the short of it there. We're updating this to program federal funds and coordinate planning activities for fiscal years 26 and 27. So this will become effective October 1st. There are two requests, and both of these can be satisfied through the link on the screen. So gnrc.org/survey/UPWP. I think you filled out this form the last couple of UPWP updates. It'll be an opportunity for you to let us know what your priorities are in terms of the issues that our region needs to grapple with, from housing affordability to traffic congestion to roadway safety. Just a quick sense of where our priorities are and where the planning activities need to focus for the next couple of years. So that's part of the survey. The meatier part, though, is an opportunity for you to tell us about and upload documents related to your local planning and any requests you have for us for how you would like to see the federal funds used for that 2-year period in terms of regional studies, regional data collection, regional modeling that might not just be beneficial to us collectively, but could be useful to you locally as well. So those are the two requests. They could both be satisfied through that survey. If you are in a situation where you have a lot of planning activities happening, you can only upload one file at a time. So it might just be easier to just put a note in the response. These are the things that we're doing, and I'm going to email Daniel my files, right? So you don't have to fill out that. You can fill out that form as many times as you want, but it's not about the form, it's about the information. So if you get into that situation, you're filling out the form, like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to do this like 10 times, it's got 10 documents to send, just email Daniel and he'll compile those for you. It's make more sense once you go to this link. Let's share this, what I got for the UPWP. Happy to answer any questions, but we'll have conversations about this document from every meeting from now on until we get it approved by the policy board and have it wrapped up. We have two schedules because I don't know yet exactly what the state and federal review process is going to look like. I think our parts can be done so that we could actually adopt this in May. But we've got to get feedback from our state and federal partners. And so we're prepared to also adopt in July, and then we'd be in good shape to be effective by October 1st, either way. Questions, comments?
October 1st, kind of a drop dead date. We have to have something adopted by that time, pretty much.
Yeah, well, that's a complicated answer, but that's the goal for sure.
Okay. Anybody have any questions for Michael about the RTP or the UPWP updates? Okay. All right, hearing none, we will move on then to our regular reports. First on the list is FHWA. Melanie Murphy, do you have any updates for us?
Yeah, a few. First, I haven't been in this meeting in like 6 months, so did a rotational assignment with the Office of National Environment with FHWA. That's come to a close, so I'm back here trying to get back in the swing of things. Trying to remember where everything's at. But excited to be back, excited to be working with everyone a lot more closely again. I was supporting the carbon reduction program at the federal level and an EDC7 initiative on integrating greenhouse gas emissions into the planning process. So a lot more knowledgeable on both of those topics now than I was 6 months ago. So always I'm happy to discuss those. On the topic of UPWP and TIP, I did want to make note that FWA and TDOT were working collectively to issue an expectations memo for both of those documents, since they're all NPOs across the board, across the state, are on the same cycle to adopt those. So we just issue kind of memo to everyone to be like, here's federal priorities, state priorities. So we're hoping to, I think, issue that UPWP one this month, and then the TIP one kind of closely after that, since that one's a little bit on a little bit of a later schedule. So look out for that relatively soon. And then I also wanted to know, and I think Sean mentioned this last time you guys met, but deadlines for the RAISE and PROTECT discretionary grant programs are coming up. RAISE is due January 30th, and PROTECT is due February 24th. So if you want to make a note on that. And then I think anytime you guys talk about safety targets, I should make sure that we give you all kudos. There's only a handful of MPOs across the country that set their own kind of safety targets. So always really excited to see Nashville MPO take kind of that initiative to set, localized regional targets when a lot of MPOs adopt the state target, which that's totally acceptable. But I think it's really great to see kind of that initiative being taken at the regional level. That was all I had.
Any questions for Melanie? Okay. Hearing that, we'll move on to the TDOT report. Mr. Morrison.
Yes, sir. Again, just from what Melanie said, again, we'll get those two memos out. Hope plan to get those done by the end of the month. Again, I'd made a notice as well to applaud you, to applaud the staff for establishing your performance measure target for safety. Again, the only one in the state that does that. So again, applaud you, all your efforts for that as well. On the planning front, the two planning grants are finishing up in Lebanon on State Route 26 and Nashville State Route 45. Pretty much a safety audit there on Old Hickory between Bell and Wright. And so those will finish up here in the next couple of months, and then I'll request that they give at least a brief presentation to the TCC on those two projects. Kind of fits into what Michael was saying in the overall grand scheme of things. Again, those become part of the UPWP and also big regional significant projects as well. So just making sure that we tie the smaller projects and the larger projects together, which a couple of these are doing that already. So keep those in mind. I'm working on a schedule for the next round of planning grants for later this year. So we'll get that out as well. So another opportunity to apply for planning grants across the state as well. You all saw updates regarding the 10-year plan during the fall. So that schedule is that, as was noted. We're currently reviewing the statewide partnership request, and then the 10-year plan should be out this spring as the General Assembly gets in session this year. With that, I don't know if John or Rebecca, anything else y'all have to add? Are y'all good? Okay. If not, they're here if you have questions after the meeting. I'm sure they'll be around as well as I. Thank you.
Thanks, Stacy. Moves on to my report. I don't necessarily have much in the way of a report, and we kind of beat it up pretty good, the safety performance targets and all that stuff. But it did remind me of an article that I saw in the paper this morning, Highway 109. I don't know if you guys saw that article, but TDOT is working closely with the other state agencies, Highway Patrol and local governments in Wilson County to lower the speed limit on Highway 109 through Wilson County to 45 miles an hour. If you've ever driven it, you'll understand why they're looking at doing that. But that's something that ties into what we were talking about earlier. That's not an engineering solution necessarily. Engineers need to determine the speed limit, but they're not talking about going and spending a bunch of money on a new project. It's enforcement, and it's the people side of it and that kind of thing. So I feel like what they're doing down there ties in very closely. There was an accident there that killed a couple of people, and TDOT's making a response to that. And I don't know if there's anybody from TDOT that can speak to that at all, but I thought that was pretty interesting. Way to approach that
I
problem.
will offer as an engineer, simply lowering the speed limit on the highway as a response to crashes doesn't really do anything. Because, yeah, it helps if there's enforcement, but the enforcement only lasts as long as the blue lights are out there. People quickly forget that. And there's a big trend now for self-enforcing or self-enforcing, self-mitigating roadways. If you really want people to drive slower, you've got to design the roadways for people to drive slower, because people are going to drive as fast as they're comfortable driving. So you've got to drive the roadways where people are uncomfortable driving fast. So for years, we've designed with a factor of safety to allow people to drive 75, 80, 85 miles an hour, because our design standards are very conservative. So we've always designed 5 miles an hour above what the posted speed limit is going to be. Well, those limits are already conservative. So what do you think people are going to do? They're going to drive faster than that. So then we're going to artificially lower the speed limit below that. Well, people know they can drive faster than that, so they're going to drive faster than that. So
I think they might be talking about some new traffic signals too. I'm sure that'll make it safer also. So
yeah, which is also not the purpose of a traffic signal either. It's to control right of way. So
but that concludes my report. Other business, is there any other business to come before the body? Did I skip something? Staff report? I'm sorry. Daniel, do you have anything? I apologize.
Not after that. Pretty straightforward staff report. If you'll look at the last 2 pages of your packet, you'll see all the meetings scheduled for the remainder of the year. The Transportation Coordinating Committee, the Transportation Policy Board, and the Regional Council Body. So you have those.
I
Yeah.
do have a request of staff, if we could update the tip, what the tip cycles will be for this year's.
Right. I will
That
make
helps
a note.
me.
By that, like the application deadlines, because
Tip amendment.
yeah, because we're probably moving away from like cycles, since we basically accommodate amendments every time the TPP meets.
Okay.
But you need to know like when you need to have your
When the dip-
request get to that meeting, so we'll update that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Make a note of that. In other news, excited, we're expanding the transportation infrastructure team. So we are in the midst of interviews right now. Hopefully getting a couple of planners and an engineer on staff to keep delivering these projects. So I think that's it.
Thank you, Daniel. Michael, do you have anything else you wanted to add?
Just want to welcome Daniel formally to this team, and he'll be leading you through these meetings moving forward. Appreciate the opportunity to be here today.
I did good. Sorry, Daniel did a good job on your first meeting. It's going to get harder from here. Now, other business. Does anybody else have any other business to come before the TCC? Okay. Hearing none, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Adjourn.
It's on the table, please. Take them out every time.
I learned my lesson.
Technical question.
Every time. But I will tell you, I've learned to tell the public though, don't go through that process. If the only thing is so you have to stop trying to regret.
Yeah, last week.
I'm not gonna recommend
Last
it.
week, so
If that's all it's gonna make.
he's in the private sector right now. So.
Right.
It's all the job openings on Tampa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a great opportunity. We did it. If you know of anybody, you know, I'll probably, I'll probably start interviewing, next week.
He said,
You got much application?
Got a few.
gravel is getting presented at GRC.
I'm hoping to fill it here. The sooner the better if I get some help. I got a few.
That's kind of just going, I kind of don't. I look at it,
Kind of a different time at the end of the year, right the first, but, you know,
it's usually.
So I feel so sorry. Kill you guys after y'all. Emergency people, the ambulance, you're having, we're gonna miss Grant.
These are like.
Between Hillsborough Road and Shackleford or not, Shackleford, blown up. They've got 6 of them.
As I moved throughout my career, from
Feels like.
the state, from the private sector to the public, it was a place you could go every year to see all your colleagues.
I have bad news, so if I made you 3 hours.
Into it now.
Yeah, I'm coming back.
I got this from politician.
Found it on the road.
Yeah, we have to space them out.
1 year and it's there.
Just crashes. Getting T-bone, passing.
Yeah.
So then we get it wide, and now people,
That's crazy.
property damages are probably down. Severe crash.
Influence that way.
Yeah, let me get with, get back to the office.
Like.
See,
We don't have one.
I think we got it actually too. Senator Hurley.
Pretty.
I didn't see you, but it was mine going fast. That guy. Yeah, the young meetings to the final, like lazy.
The research out there,
now it's not.
my highway is with that great intersection.
So it's not a go to the.
Sumner County's got some of that.
It's you immediately know that these are
That's
some.
what I think that is the highway.
That's probably the best bet for the next few ratings. Yeah. Yeah, and then there you go, all that.
Are you done? Are you over inside and so that they were like, oh, God. Yeah, no, but, yeah, it's like leaving it saying, keep out.
Seeing another match.
It's straight.
Yeah, you weren't gonna just put a bunch of wiggles in it. Or something.
The problem, you know,
So, I know nothing about.
economic development,
Like,
and it drive
Goes to.
No. Here, so forget when we get back to about the sticker.
Go.
I would go to ask Hannah in the front there. She's the one that sets it up. I mean, I don't.
All there. Okay.
Language, whatever.
I understand that.
Kind of like, it needs to.
Gallus.
But
Gallus.
doesn't do it.
He and I talked a little bit.
So that's
We have a corridor management agreement that,
that's,
does about the gallon. Like, you need to do.
the barriers now, so.
What did you say? Great job. Yeah, that's the question. It's
one of
we want to be in the right direction.
Great sock fly out.
Till the careful meetings.
they're like.
Oh, sure. No, I was there.
The barrier, but
I was there for all that.
that's a big, that happens all.
Reach out to somebody.
Stuff? No.
There's one specific that I want to ask him about. And you
Right.
can kind
Well, he had nothing to do with that one. No, he had nothing to do with that one.
I can get back to the
We're dealing with that on 386 extension right now.
county.
or Civil Rights Museum, or, there have been a number of suggestions. And again, that's just to give you some background about what the discussion on the ground has been. And then there are people like Ed Kendall, the former council person, who says it's a waste of money, you don't want it at all. This is, another thing of revisiting the past and that 164 million. Brings me to the second thing, and that is you mentioned your ozone and all that.
Yeah, I did primary on the carbon reduction program, which is one of the new formula programs funded by the bipartisan infrastructure law, the new transmission bill. That's one. And then I also helped a little bit with an everyday counts effort kind of initiative that actually pushes to integrating greenhouse gas analysis into the planning process.
So the question is, if we're missing targets, does that mean MARTA is going to come back at some point and we'll have to go ahead and take our cars to testing stations like we used to?
So with the like the PM2, like what they're talking about with the EPA like standards, I don't think there'd be any emissions testing as a part of that because Memphis is in the non-attainment area or maintenance. So they've missed kind of the targets and see Knoxville. I don't believe they have emissions testing. Do you know, does Memphis or Knoxville do emissions testing on vehicles?
I'm not sure. When Chattanooga went to attainment, they did away with theirs, but I'm not sure.
And if it's for PM 2.5, that's not. I mean, I don't know if really the emissions testing is.
Doesn't ring a bell.
Yeah.
When I was in school in Knoxville, they would have, and this is many years ago, when the air was dirtier than it is now, but they would have temperature inversions because of the airflow not jumping the mountains.